we are flying across to LA, which is very exciting for me, to chat to Boy Untitled. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, very good. It's 72 and sunny in Los
Ah,
Angeles, and birds
um,
are chirping.
is it always sunny in Los Angeles? Is that true?
It's definitely mostly sunny, but we also have June gloom, and then our the newest season is wildfire season.
Right.
So besides that, yeah,
Mm,
besides
yeah.
that, it's
And is that happening? It seems to be happening every year now, right?
I mean, the last 2 years have been. I mean, last year was definitely the worst. It was several weeks. I mean, in my neighborhood, you can't see out the windows, but there's like hills around my house. You couldn't see the next hill over for like 2 weeks, which was really gnarly. Yeah, it was like orange, and yeah, it looked like the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And the year before, a little bit less so, but I'm anyway not trying to call that into being, but like it
Yeah.
has been getting worse for
Yeah. Yeah. No, it doesn't sound good. So have you always been in LA or are you from
sure.
elsewhere?
I'm originally from Philadelphia, but I moved to Los Angeles right after, like a couple days after graduating high school. I was just like,
Okay.
deuces, I'm going to LA. So I've been here for 15 years now,
Oh,
which
cool.
is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Oh, so enjoying it then, I take it.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, well, I've never been to Los Angeles. I have been to Philly.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Where in
yeah.
Philly? Like,
I studied when I was studying at university. I did music, and I did an exchange to the States, and I was placed in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. It was called Mansfield, and it was like somewhere in the kind of northeast, I think, of the state.
oh,
Like
wow. And
really like
Pennsylvania is so big.
small town, yeah. So, but I went to Philadelphia. It's like one of the first cities that I kind of visited. So yeah, I really liked it. It was a long time ago though. That
It's a
was
pretty city.
talking a few years ago,
Yeah.
but so
So it was.
so yeah, tell us a little bit about you and how Boy Untitled came about and what your music journey is so far.
Well, for sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk
Pleasure.
to you. And yeah, it's always a gift to like have a space where you can kind of talk about your art and your process. And so I appreciate that.
Great.
Um, so for me, Boy Untitled started, I guess it's 4 years ago now. I grew up as a musician. I was a classically trained pianist and a professional singer in a choir growing up, which was in Philadelphia, which was
Yeah.
really exciting and awesome. But then after college, I really put music down in a big way. I just kind of stepped away from it and decided to focus on other things. But when I turned 30, as many do, I was having just kind of an existential, what am I doing with my life? What do I want to be doing? What am I not doing that I wish I was doing? And I guess that was the big question that I had asked of myself. And at the time, that was music. That's something that I have always kind of had in the back of my head. I always continued to diddle around on the piano. I had this little electric keyboard in my tiny little apartment in mid city for a long time, and I would just kind of go to it occasionally and try to pick things back up. But it wasn't really until 30 in my head I was like, in order for me to like feel fulfilled and happy, that was definitely music. So
Mhm.
I'd had, being in LA, you're constantly surrounded by people who are creating and trying to be the most and all of that. So I was at no loss for inspiration or people to look to kind of guide me on that journey.
Yeah.
But it really was a journey. I think, small backstory. From the age of like 27 to 30 was a really transformative period of my life. It's kind of where I shifted my consciousness really shifted at that point.
Mm.
People will call it your Saturn return. Other people just call it growing up. But there was definitely a huge shift in me emotionally and mentally, just in the things that I cared about, and more of an awareness and attention to like who I am as an individual.
Mhm.
And it a shift in selfishness. I would say, like in my early 20s, I definitely, what a lot of 20 something year olds do, just kind of like looking, for me personally, looking for like the next best thing, like
Yeah.
going on a great trip, the next boyfriend, the whatever it was, whatever ways in which I was numbing myself. And when I hit 27, there was just a lot of things that started to unfurl for me in my life, and I really just had, I found selfishness again in a more healthy and holistic way,
Mm.
just being more in tune with like what I needed in order to grow and be a person that was more aligned with, what my soul's expression was going to be.
Mm.
And that music was kind of like, once I got to that 30 point, that was like, okay, I've done all this work. I'm continuing to do all this work now. How does that materialize in the physical world outside of just like what my experience is? And so I really poured that into music. And my first project, self-titled Boy Untitled, was actually a five song EP that to me was my version of the hero's journey. It was the 5 stages of emotional evolution. Each song kind of corresponded with one of those stages. The first of which being stagnation, which, that moment where you feel stuck and incapable of evolving or escaping your current reality. And then the second song was about recognition, that change is possible. It's just like the spark. The song is called Spark. It's just
Yeah.
like the spark of recognition that change is possible, which then went into the next song, Action, which is about like taking that spark and turning it into action and like really doing the work in your life to I don't know, tear down the structures that don't need to be there anymore, build new ones, and facing your shadows and really like confronting yourself with the light and the dark, and then
Mm.
assimilating those two things into one whole person. And then the fourth song, Victory, which is what it is, victory, the overcoming of the self, and not overcoming of the self, the integration of the self. And then the final song being Evolution, which is once we reach that perceived end goal, realizing that that end is just the start of a new beginning, and it's that
Mm.
circle that like continues to happen again and again and again. And there was a 5-part book of poetry that went along with it.
Ah, cool.
But yeah, so I mean, in terms of where I started and how I got to like who I am as an artist now, that very much was the inception. And there was a lot that was wrapped up in that first project. One, there was just the kind of the mechanical learning of like how to write music, how to get it onto the DSP, what to do to promote it, the business of da 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 da, all of
Yeah.
that stuff. For me, that was like my version of a second education.
Uh-huh.
Um, but then also wrapped up in that time, from the time I started writing that project to the time I released it, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer,
Okay.
and then when he when when he passed away was basically a couple weeks later is when I released the project. So
Mm.
that project, while I kind of like wrote it in like my 30th year, and like I wrote all this music down and I'm ready to put it out. It actually took me 3 years to put it out, and in that process I realized that the reason I wrote that music was actually to help me move through the process of my father dying, and
Yeah.
along with it all the healing that my family had to do around my homosexuality, because I grew up in a very Christian home.
Mm.
um, and so there's a lot of acceptance that had to happen. You know, we struggled a lot with my being gay, and then with
Mm.
my getting married, and my dad kind of having a reckoning at the end of his life of like being confronted with these things that he had resisted for so long and pushed against for so long, and then at the very, very last minute being like, I love and accept you, and I'm sorry, and like none of this shit matters, and you're part of my family. Um, you know, so that project very much was all about that, even before I knew that's what it was about.
Mm.
Um,
Wow, really
and
deeply personal
honestly,
project.
yeah, very very personal, and in a way that I had no way of knowing. I remember I was with my executive producer Rush Davis, and we finished writing all the music, and I was like, all right, now I want to start putting this out immediately. And he was like, baby, he's like, slow down. He's like, this music will come out when it's ready to come out. You might have written it, you might have put the words to, pen to paper, but until you have lived the truth of these songs, they will not be fully expressed
Mm.
and they will not come out. And that bitch was right. I mean, like, it was, it went so deep. And honestly, like, it set the tone for, what I'm doing now. A lot of my music is, I would say, like, as an artist, I'm an indie pop artist. Um, there's a lot of other artists that I pull reference from, like Bob Moses and Rufus Du Sol were kind of the two acts that really got me like really passionate and excited about like finally writing.
Yeah.
And then there, the Troye Sivan years and years. Those are obviously like very um, adjacent references that are always
Yeah.
inspiring.
Yeah.
Ali X, um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. There's just tons of references. But
did your classical background influence any of that musical journey as well, or do you think that was quite separate?
I would say I would definitely say in practice, for sure. I mean, in terms of piano, so like I said, I was a classically trained pianist. I had a lot of um, training, but a lot of pressure in that training to like, it's all about like hand posture and every note being perfect, but while being perfect, also having like cadence and flow that feels natural and expression. There's like so many layers to the perfection that really honestly created a lot of trauma around
Mm.
like using the piano as a tool that honestly is like the most readily accessible thing that I had when I started writing. Um, so yes, it did influence that in that it created a mirror, just like in writing music. It's for me, it's all about like moving through like emotional journeys every time I put out a new song, and like integrating the piano into my performance has been a thing, and like releasing a lot of like childhood trauma
Mm.
around like that perfectionism. And but also like just practically speaking, yes, like I write a lot of stuff on the piano. um my vocal training growing up, also classical vocal training, definitely has given me a baseline knowledge of like how I can use my voice
Mm-hmm.
in the different frequencies, and like just chest voice, falsetto, and all of those things. So yeah, definitely influenced there. And also just when it comes to like producing and mixing, I definitely do. I feel like my sensibilities do have kind of orchestral qualities to it,
Yeah.
or I love doing vocal arrangement. Like,
Yeah.
so the choral part of that comes in there as
It's
well.
a really key part. Yeah. Yeah. No, you can tell that. You can tell that in your music. So yeah, that's cool to know. Great. And did that whole, so there's so many elements to that first EP.
Yeah.
Did you conceive all of that at the time, or is this now looking back that you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is how it kind of all fits together?
Um, yeah, and I was rambling on and on before, so sorry about that. But yeah, because there are so many pieces of it, I generally speaking love top-down perspectives on projects. I like to think about, okay, so I'm going to write a song, but then what's the visual collateral that goes along with it? What's the video collateral? What does that look like inside of a performance? What does that feel like inside of an experience?
Mm-hmm.
So with that project in particular, um, I was like, I'm going to write an album this year, 30's the year, but I didn't know where the fuck to start. And so I just started a daily writing practice, just, writing poetry every day. And then um, that became the book. And then once I had that kind of gave me the roadmap to say, okay, the book is going to be 5 parts. There's going to be 5 songs that correspond with it. There's going to be a lyric video for each, and a music video, and a series of mini music videos for each. And then there's going to be a one-man show live stage performance where I incorporate the spoken word with the music, and then the visuals behind me. And I did craft all of those things into like
Mm.
kind of a single um, experience, which I premiered at the Queer Biennial in Los Angeles. That happened in 2018, I think it
Mm-hmm.
was. but yeah, for that project in particular, that it was very like there was like a global perspective kind of going into it, but the emotional lessons of the project,
Hmm.
all of that shit came like way after the fact. Like
Yeah.
my my mind and body wasn't ready for that.
And did you hear, it's like sometimes the thing I love about releasing music is that you will then get back feedback from your audience, listening to of stuff that you would never even have picked up yourself. Has that happened with you as well with your songs? Like people kind of saying, "Oh, it makes me think of this, or it makes me feel this." That surprises you, or does it all kind of align with what you were expecting?
I think I mean, there's certainly always surprises in what people gravitate towards. You know, a song that for me is like, oh, this is a great song, but it's not like a single. You know what I mean? The song is like more for me than for the masses or whatever. And then somebody like really saying like, oh my gosh, I love Out, which is kind of the last song on my last project, and it's you know it's more of a prayer. You know the words are I'm breathing out, like it's literally just the exhalation after all the other stuff, and
Mm.
so many people gravitated towards that song, and the feedback I got was so strong for that piece. You know, I would say like the kind of like meta theme of all my music is emotional evolution, and that sounds really esoteric, and it sometimes it is like Boy Untitled is very poetic, and a lot of the new music I'm putting out, especially the one that I'm putting, which we'll speak about later, Losing Time, is really like just about my experience and some shit. You know what I mean? It's not like step into the heavens and bring forth your light. You know, it's not that kind of thing. Um, but because because my music does have this kind of like just I guess human quality to it, I guess is what I'm going for. I There are moments where um people will like who I have no idea who they are will like slide into my DMs. My last release, Lionsgate, there was a person who messaged me. He was like, I just want you to know that I've been listening to this song every day during my meditation practice. And like, I've actually been using your music for the last year or so, like in my energy work. And like, this song I'm using to like call in my power and all. And he was just like saying all these things. And that honestly is like one of the best compliments I've ever
Yeah, that's cool.
received. Like, and I've had some of those moments. I'm like, that's how I want my music to be
Mm.
perceived and used. And he gave me that like direct feedback. I was like, oh, like that's so cool. It's so
Yeah, that's really
cool.
cool. Is yeah, that's one of the like the powers of, you know, being able to release it, and you don't really know who's going to be there and listening and how they're going to kind of make it part of their world as well. So it's that's cool. It's really nice to hear. So the one of the I think the way that I was introduced to you was maybe last year through your collaboration with Guess. Can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that? I love that song.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, thank you.
And
Yeah,
video as
Imposter is
well.
an
Video is really cool.
thank you. Yeah, I'll talk about all those things. I Imposter, I'm incredibly proud of. So Guess and I collaborated on that. Guess and I have been friends for a little while now. We kind of met a couple years ago, just you know, girls about town. Like, you know, we both kind of like were in the club kid scene for a bit. He more so in San Francisco and I more in LA, but like kind of on the tail end of that intersected. And then um, you know, I mean, really and truly over the COVID period, the pandemic, Guess and I really, really, really dug into our friendship in a serious way. I think um, he's become one of my closest friends, and definitely my closest collaborator for a number of reasons. Obviously, like during the pandemic, like having making our friendship wasn't new by any means, but it definitely was. I think went to a deeper level, and to experience that during the pandemic when we're also experiencing so much separation, I feel like was pretty unique. But we really connected over just wanting to build community
Hmm.
around music, and you know, and we can talk more about that. I'll get to Imposter, but like briefly, especially in LA, there's like tons of people doing tons of things. And like in the UK, I'm not sure if it feels similarly, but oftentimes it feels like everyone's doing these things adjacent to each other, not necessarily like supporting of and with each other.
Yeah, there's
And
definitely that. Yeah.
that's yeah, and that's not to talk shit. I mean, everyone's just like focused on the thing that they're like trying to make happen, and I respect that. But Guest and I really like came together and were like, oh, I really wish that maybe we had like there was just a network of people who were like constantly feeding into each other's projects and just being there to support everyone's releases, and it didn't feel like a big ask to like repost a song. It was just like it was like community building, right?
Yeah.
So um and also in that experience I had you know pandemic happened just as I was about to start diving into my next project after Boy Untitled, and like so many things during the pandemic, the expectations I had set and the goals I had set out to do just dissolved because of the world being what it was.
Yeah.
And there's a mourning process that
Mm.
I'm sure like as an artist like and as a human just like there's things that happened once like the world broke that you had to like release and mourn,
Mm.
and that mourning is still taking place. It's going to take place for years, but you know I think my mourning was really centered around like, okay, but what am I doing?
Mm.
Like what am I working towards as a musician? And Guess in my friendship, like really over the course of the year was just he just Guess I'm gonna gush about you. He created a really just vulnerable space for me to like express that, like feeling like a total fake. And I remember the first one of the first sessions we were just like noodling around with stuff. Like I want to write music. I don't know what I want to be writing, but like I want to keep moving towards something. And he's like, come over. And I remember sitting down with him and, sessions, as you know, can be stressful when you're writing with new people because it's like, oh, well, I have to show up and bring my A game. And like, what if I'm like not as good as they are? Are they going to want to fuck with me anymore? And then there's like this whole mental, like,
Yeah.
whatever happening, right?
I feel like it's kind of like a first
And
date, like the first meeting and collaboration is like a bit like,
a
oh,
thousand. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, like, okay. And then it's like, oh, I have this idea. And like, oop, you winced. You don't like that idea.
yeah.
Do we not know how to
Oh no,
communicate?
you don't like
It's
me
like,
anymore.
yeah. So like that was happening, and then like nothing creative was really taking place, and then finally I was like, I just need to like say this out loud because it's like eating me up inside. I'm like, I feel like I feel like a total fake. I sometimes listen to Boy Untitled and I doubt that I even wrote it. Like that's how much the imposter syndrome like really had like sunk its teeth into me. It's
Mm.
like you I will never be able to do that again. And I kind of like brought that to the table and I was just really honest with him and I'm like I don't want you to not want to write with me, and like I don't feel like I'm bringing anything of value, and I like that makes me feel icky, and whatever. And Jess was so gracious and just like held space for me to say all those things, and then we started writing, and then the first like the hook for Imposter came out, and we actually spent the rest of that year. The song just like what we couldn't finish the song. There was like so many times where we tried to finish it where I'm like, the song just doesn't want to get finished. And there's some other songs that we had been working on that also weren't finished. And I was like, it's like, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's like I can't finish this song. And going back to what Rush had told me during More Entitled, it's like the music isn't going to happen until you've like lived the experience,
Mm.
and like you can speak on it with authority and truth, and like just groundedness. And so it wasn't until like later that year that we finally finished it, and after a series of things. But yeah, I mean, like that song to me is I'm really proud of it because it is so honest, and I think it's a really good collaboration of both of our sensibilities. Guess I would used to say to me like, I don't know if I can like really write dance music, and I was like, you have a great sense of like rhythm and cadence, like I have no doubts that you can like bring in. I like to me that song is a vibe, and um, it's also recording that was definitely when I really kind of got into it with guests about like just doing recording the vocals. I love doing that with him. I record all my vocals with guests now because we just have such a good
That's cool.
banter, and it's so easy and effortless. And then we've just gotten into the habit of creating these like really rich like harmonies like inside of like the hooks and things. Anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think kind of the first of what became many collaborations. I mean, my whole next project, Zenith, guest co-wrote, um,
Oh, cool. Okay.
along with it, yeah, along with a few others. But yeah, I mean, that was a very long-winded answer, but
Well, I mean, no, it's great. That's lovely to hear, like, hear a bit of the background unit as well. And I think that's one of the cool things about songwriting, whether that's, if you work with a producer or or you're collaborating with someone else as well, it's like how much time goes into like the lyrics and like just talking about the issues and whatever you're trying to like say in the song, and like then trying to figure out what you're actually trying to say, and like a lot of it is, it's almost like therapy. I feel it's like
no, it really
songwriting
is.
therapy.
I mean, like in 100%. I mean, there's so many sessions where guests and I were like having a glass of wine, and I'm like, I'm trying to like get words out, and he's like, okay, hear that, but like, what are you feeling?
Yeah.
Like, what are you actually feeling? And he's been really firm on like, okay, but like I need something like really clear and like give it to me in one sentence. And so it very much is therapy. And and that's why I really value our friendship as
Mm,
well, just because um so much of our writing experience is about working through our shit, and it's also about imagining and dreaming. And we're always texting or calling each other and just being like, I had this idea, like, is this crazy? Or like my intuition told me this, or like I just had a vision for like this idea. And there's, I don't know, I feel like those people are sometimes hard to come by, especially in a city like LA where everyone's very protective over their vision.
mm,
And it's like, this is my idea, don't take it. Like, it's so reciprocal with us, and we're doing what we can with Imposter, with these other songs and these other collaborations that we're working on to really like expand that into more of an ethos that like a community can plug into, versus just like, oh my gosh, I had this really crazy one-off experience. It's like, no, that
right.
that should be the ethos
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all of our community.
Absolutely. No, totally. I think that's, yeah, thing that I've similarly found over the last year is like, yeah, finding that community and building that community, even if it's a virtual one for the time being. These connections will hopefully continue and happen in real life,
Yeah.
beyond this time as well. So I think that's, yeah, it's really important, and it's great to hear that you're able
Yeah.
to kind of find that with him and take it forward as well.
Mhm.
So
Totally.
speaking of then his production, so he's producing on your latest single, Losing Time, as well, is that right?
Yeah, so Losing Time, Lionsgate, and all the subsequent songs that'll be coming out this year. Like I said, back during the pandemic, it's like, what am I doing? I don't know what to do. I'm like losing a sense of myself as an artist. Um, I actually took a week off, or I took a sabbatical from work, which I was fortunate enough to do. But I basically me, um, my drummer and um, and a friend Andre Mooring, and then Rush Davis, who is an incredible songwriter, and he executive produced for Untitled. I took all of us to Arizona for a week and rented a house, and we basically did a writing camp for
Oh,
this next
cool.
project, Zenith. And so Guess and Andre were kind of like the production hands on deck to like help us put the ideas together, and then like Guess was also contributing to lyrics, melody, and then Rush and I were doing lyrics, melody. I was like fiddling on the piano here and there, um, and so that's where like all of this music kind of was like where it all started.
Mhm.
And then Guest and I have done a couple sessions like on each of these songs to kind of like finish up the structure of the song, and then I have another producer in Aiden who's been helping with the actual like he's like taking all of the sessions and then actually like fully producing them. Um, but then Guest and I, like I said, have been doing recording all the vocals and like coming up with the vocal arrangements for each of these songs.
Nice.
So on Losing Time, yeah, he contributed in all of those ways as well.
Cool. Well, I'm very excited to be able to play Losing Time and premiere Losing Time on Glitterbeam as well, which is really
Yes,
cool. Very cool. So,
yes.
yeah, let's chat a little bit about this song. So
Okay,
this is
cool.
about exploring relationship pressures during quarantine. Is that right? And sort of some of the feelings and thoughts that came up through that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the whole of like what this comes under the umbrella of Zenith. This one project, which we'll hear more about next month. But the kind of the the theme behind Zenith. Zenith means by definition the moment at which something is most potent or powerful. And, kind of in the wake of like what's happening in the world, all of the songs from this project really examine like what happens when the veil falls away, and 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 like what happens in the space between like stories of the world. We're watching this one story like vision of the world kind of fall away, and this like the inklings of a new one starting to bubble. But like to me, I feel like we're in the space in between those. But inside of that space, there's an opportunity to capture um, something incredibly powerful that we can then take into and like help actually like seed like what this new version of the world will look like. And so losing time kind of in that context very much to me is about moving through perceptions of what it means to be in relationship, and particularly with queer people. Um, we don't have a long lineage to pull from in terms of like what it means to be in a long-term relationship, what it means to be married for 30, 40, 50 years. We don't have like a hetero dialogue to pull from. And I think that the more and more that queer relationships are like become mainstream, and they've been mainstream for a while, but I mean, like, there's definitely like it's not just about like gay, lesbian. There's a broadening of queerness that's happening. Like you know, like elevating trans voices and experiences, non-binary people. I was listening to your interview with Neo 10Y, just listening to
Yeah.
him talk about like the non-binary experience and all that, and like that's so beautiful. But inside of that broadening, now we're seeing relationships portrayed between all of these different types of people like in a broader sense. And so when I say coming more to the fore of like I guess like the cultural understanding, that's what I mean. And a lot of times the way I see queer relationships perceived um, is like hashtag relationship goals. You see like
Ah,
two beautifully chiseled men who are just like both influencers on Instagram, just like, oh, if this is our casual morning together, but it's like perfectly lit and like they're
yeah.
just like glossy, and it's nice to have. It's I mean, I have nothing against being thoughty and aspirational, and I think there's a place for that, of course, but because I participate in that culture myself. But um, when we talk about what it really truly means to be in relationship with somebody, um, for me, it goes far beyond aspirational.
Mm.
Um, there's really hard work that has to happen, and this song thematically to me is an opportunity to normalize conversation around the difficulties of, oh, I found my perfect boyfriend, girlfriend, lover, whatever. But like, okay, but like what's on the other side of that? It's not just like a picture perfect wedding. And um, you know, during the quarantine period, obviously like we were all like stuck inside either with ourselves or roommates or significant others. And that shit was crazy. Like, I mean, truly,
Still is.
you know, still is, my husband and I had been together now. We met at Burning Man in 2014. We we
Nice.
had he lived in San Francisco, I lived in LA. We had this like really fiery romance, like long distance romance, like where we were traveling literally every single week back and forth to see each other. Um, we when we went to the burn together, the next year I proposed to him, and then he like uprooted his life and moved down to LA, and
Nice.
um, and we had this really catalytic beginning with each other. Um, when I met him, when I like there was something like 5 or 10 minutes after I met him, I remember like catching the scent, just like his, like the smell of his neck or whatever,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like his pheromones or something. But it like in my head, I was like, oh my god, like we've we've known each other like
Mm,
across like multiple lifetimes, and
that's
like
cool.
we've gone through time and space together, and we I think people felt that um, in a lot of, and this isn't to be self-aggrandizing, but it's to put into context why this song is like so um, such a deep cut. But like when we started that relationship, people would always comment on like you two, or there's just like something about you two that's like special and magnetic, and like I hope I can have a relationship like this someday, and all of these things which are so beautiful to hear. But also at a certain point, to me, I internalized as overwhelming, because then it became like, oh, I have to maintain this appearance of like us being that couple.
Right.
And, I remember when we first started struggling um, a couple years ago, we were still living in our old apartment, and, Kyle wasn't really like gelling with Los Angeles. And, there was just, we went through this phase where we could not communicate with each other. Like it didn't matter what we said or like how we approached each other. There was like so much of my trauma was rubbing up against his trauma, and like things that I hadn't yet like worked through myself were butting up with his, and it was really difficult.
Mm,
And then we worked through that like in like relationships or waves, right? Like we go kind of like in and out of coordinates with each other. Um, but last year, was a whole more. Um, Last year was like a whole other level, because we're
mm,
dealing with the world falling apart, the mourning process. Just we're having this experience that's deeply individual and personal, while also like having this like global communal experience. And
mm,
um, it just, when you're inside with someone for that long, who knows you as well as that, y'all become mirrors to each other. And so it's like constantly having this mirror staring back at you that you can't throw a sheet over or like break or put away. It's just always there. And so if you're not dealing with your shit, like it's going to come up. And for us, it brought us to a breaking point where we had to sit down. I mean, New Year's, actually. We I wrote this song like early, like in fall of last year, because we had just kind of for the first time broached the subject of divorce, and that's terrifying. I have my own abandonment issues. I like again grew up in a very Christian home, and so like divorce is looked down upon, and there's like all these
mm.
things.
Do you feel there's
But I wrote that
more?
song.
Do you feel there's more of a pressure as well, sort of going on from what you were saying before about like a gay marriage for it to succeed uh,
Yes,
than straight marriages?
yes. To prove to heteroculture that it's viable,
Right.
right? So you have the like kind of the popularized version of queer relationships, which is the relationship goals. version. So there's like that pressure, and then there's the like underlying pressure of like kind of the Christian upbringing, where it's like you have to make this work. It's your duty for God to create this thing to work. And then there's just like the social pressure of like of if a relationship that beautiful and connected falls apart, then like what's the point? So that's really what this song is about. It's just like really confronting. That's the lyric. Let's confront our feelings. This love is automatic. Still all in, but you don't want it when you have it. Lost inside with you stuck inside the loop. This song is that. It's being caught inside of that space and like not necessarily knowing how to get out, but just acknowledging it and being honest with it. And that's
Mm.
you know that that empowers me to move through it. And that's
Mm.
what I'm hoping again to do with this song. It's just like normalize conversation around that, so we can say like, "Hey, I've been in this relationship for 10 years or 20 years or whatever, and like at this point in our relationship, like this is what happens, and this how we move through it." Especially in like non-traditional relationships, right? My husband and I are open. Um, we've had other people emotionally inside of our relationship, and sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. Like we're talking about like living in different cities part time, like because we both want to be doing different things, and there's like a certain level of trust that has to happen that
Mm.
I think is very unique to that
Definitely.
experience. So yeah,
What does what does he think of the song?
he loves it actually, and I before I started like pitching the song out to press, and I sent him a little brief. I was
Mhm.
like, so here, because it's funny, Kyle, like he's like I he's like I realized I was like, do you know what this song is about? And he was like, not really. He's like, I hear your music all the time because you're working on it in the basement, and like so I just constantly hear it. So I have the songs memorized, but like I don't necessarily like look into the deeper meaning. And so I sent him like the lyrics. I sent him like the little brief that I was putting together about it, and he loved it. He was just like, this is like really honest, and he's like, I appreciate you sharing it with me first. Um, but my husband is also in the process of building his healing practice and his own business, and a lot of he works with people who are also like working through relationship issues, and like he specializes in releasing emotional trauma and working through emotional trauma. And so when it comes to the work he does with relationships, a lot of our story also comes into play.
Mhm.
And so we're both just now tapping into like we're on the other side of that experience. Like we talked about getting divorced, and and then we had to decide like, is this something that we want to be in? And if not, then like let's walk away and just love each other while we do that. And we like once we got to that place, suddenly we were able to like really start working through all of our shit. And now our relationship, I'm grateful to say, is like has never been in a better place, and it's never been more connected and symbiotic, and we're just supporting each other, um and also allowing ourselves to fully be our individual selves, which has always been like one of like the most to us one of the most important things in the relationship dynamic is not losing ourselves into us, but giving each other space to grow and evolve in their own experience, and then bring those experiences back into us.
Mm.
So there's this kind of like inward and outward movement that kind of like pulses through the relationship for us. And but now we're like in this wonderful place, and we're both in a place where we can take the integration of that experience and share it with our communities
Right.
in a way that's hopefully helpful. So
Yeah, well, it's storytelling, that's part of it. So, it's great. Great that you have the opportunity to be able to do that, I guess, as part of your work. No, thank you for sharing that. It's really good to get, a great insight onto that song, and all the thoughts that go into that. It's like the songwriting process is such a distilling of all these things into finding the right kind of words that you can just fit into like a 3-4 minute piece, but there's so much behind it all as well. So
yeah.
it's really good to dive into all of that. So thank you.
Yeah,
So
totally.
we're also going to hear another one of your tracks, which was a live performance. Is that right? House in D sharp major. So tell us about this track and also the performance itself as well.
Yeah, totally. So this is another song that we wrote with Guess and excuse me, Andre and Rush um, during that writing camp that I did for Zenith. So this will be part of a release that's forthcoming. This performance itself, though, is my first live performance in like a year and a half.
Yeah.
I just performed at the Mint LA, which is kind of an indie circuit classic here. And it was such a bizarre performance. It was like some pre-post pandemic hybrid. Like I was in the green room with my guitarist, and then they had like a whole camera set up, and then that was live streaming literally right outside the door to the garden patio. They have like a big screen, so like I would perform, and then there'd be a delay, and then I'd hear applause. But like I don't know. It's like couldn't I just be outside at that point?
Yeah.
But it was really fun. It was like a very low stakes, fun um, opportunity to play all of this new music that I have written over the last
Hmm.
year. Just getting it out of the studio and like onto the stage, which is like I'm sure you know and appreciate is a
Yeah.
totally different thing.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and it's a way to test things out as well and sort of see what happens, and also change songs up a little bit if you want to as well. All that stuff.
Yeah. And it's funny that this song in the recorded version is more of a house homage. And
Mm.
so it has, I think here it's like, set a world on fire, escape into the night with me. And then in the recorded version, it's set a world on fire, escape into the night with me. It has like it's more of like a house group.
Yeah.
Um, but I chose this one. You asked if I had any acoustic recordings. I chose this one just because yeah, being in that stage space for the first time, it I was like nervous, which
Yeah.
to me I always take as a great like whenever I'm nervous I've like reprogrammed my brain to be like, oh, that's great, you care, like you
Yeah.
still care. And
That's a really good way to think about
like
it.
use
Yeah.
that, yeah, and use that energy. And I've gotten into the I whenever I'm like nervous backstage, I'll kind of like squat down on the ground and get really low, and I'll just try to like suck in all that energy and just think about it like running up my spine, and just try to channel it into the performance. And that performance I did, there was like tons of times where I was flat or like forgot a lyric or whatever the heck. But I listened to the recording and I was like, but it's also just so honest,
Mm.
and this song in particular, I feel like I just really was in the flow of it. And you know i I love those moments where you perform a song for, maybe it's not the first time, it could be the 100th time, but like you just, it's like you soften to whatever script you've kind of programmed into your brain about what the song could be, and then it
Yeah.
just kind of like expands into something totally different that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
And this was very that, which, yeah, which
Oh, that's
I don't
cool.
know, makes me
Oh,
smile.
you're making me miss the stage. Really want to get back on it.
Totally, totally, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's gonna, oh, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you. So before you go though, tell us what sort of things should we watch out for? Any dates? Any things to keep in mind for what's coming
Yes,
next?
definitely. So, well, Thursday, now, today, I think when this is being aired,
Today, when is this happening?
I'm
No.
releasing. Yeah, today when this is definitely happening is I'm releasing Losing Time.
Yeah.
So that's my latest single. Again, co-written by Gas, Andre Mooring, Rush Davis. Um, so that, and then in 2 to 3 weeks, I'll have a music video come out for that as well. And then the following month, I'll be releasing my next single and kind of re-releasing all this music as the Zenith EP. Um, and then I have a couple things coming after that.
Cool.
So yeah, that's
Well,
all.
great. Well, do keep us posted. We would love to play and hear about all these things. So, uh,
Yeah,
Fab. Well, how exciting.
absolutely.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and being able to play a couple of your tracks. That's really great.
Thank you so much for having me, and again, just
Oh,
creating space for me and others to, to share our story.
yeah, absolutely. Gotta keep on doing that, I think. So yeah, thank you. Well, take
Great.
care. Enjoy the LA day as it unfolds. It's night coming into
I
nighttime
will.
here in
It's right out my window.
London. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Bye
Right.
bye.
Bye.